Amen. If you don't have access to the Great Controversy, there are 3 copies by the door. In this morning's class, we spoke about the relationship between the Great Controversy and the book Early Writings. I suggested that Early Writings was the book that the Lord brought forth to prepare God's people for the Sunday law in the 1888 history. It was the work that he was going to use to prepare God's people for the latter rain that was coming and for the work to be completed. That work didn't happen, as we know, and based upon that premise, I'm saying that the Great Controversy is the book, I guess we all really realise that. It's the book of our generation, the book that God is going to use to pour out the Holy Spirit upon his people during the Sunday law period. We spoke that the book Early Writings was essentially a compilation, not a true compilation, of 3 independent books. The first one was Christian Views and Experience of Ellen White, which is written in 1851. Second one was a supplement, which was in 1854. And the third one was Spiritual Gifts. I said 57, but it's actually 1858. So that's just a reminder of what we spoke about this morning. And we also mentioned Testimonies to the Church, Volume 1, how Ellen White refers to the church being Laodicea, and that is in 1857 she picks up that subject. And you can find that on page 141 from Testimonies to the Church, Volume 1. That coding would be 1T 141. The chapter title is Be Zealous and Repent, which is obviously taken from Revelation chapter 3. And I think Brother Theodore commented that James White was already speaking about the church being in a Laodicean condition, and he speaks about that in 1850, but he marks the church going into Laodicea in 1845, if you see the comments that he makes then. But that's in one article. In another article he's telling us that in 1850 the church is definitely Babylon. But he picks 1845. Sorry? What did I say? Laodicea, sorry. Laodicea. He picks up 1845 because of the work of William Miller and Himes and the Second Advent Association. Yeah. Are there any questions on that? Okay, so in Great Controversy, chapter 17, we got to page 301, paragraph 3. 301, paragraph 3. Just want to have a quick review. The beginning of the chapter, which is 299, paragraph 1, first sentence. One of the most solemn and yet most glorious truths revealed in the Bible is that of Christ's second coming to complete the work of redemption. So that's a reasonably straightforward sentence. It's identifying that the second advent is one, not the only one. It's one of the most solemn and yet most glorious truths. There are other truths in the scriptures besides the second advent. We got to 301 paragraph 3, as I've said, and I think we got a bit further than that actually. All of these paragraphs are essentially dealing with the second advent, and she just goes one passage after another in the Bible that deals with this subject of the second advent. She quoted from Jude, Job, Psalms, Isaiah, Habakkuk, Acts, 1 First Thessalonians, Revelation. Over and over again, she's quoting many, many Bible passages that deal with that subject. Then we got to 301 paragraph 3, and the first sentence there, about his coming cluster the glories of that restitution of all things which God hath spoken by the mouth of all his holy prophets since the world began. So we spoke about what the clustering was, and we mentioned what those glories were. So we've got a little picture here. Clustering is a group, grouping together or something, and I just gave a picture of 5 people. They all come together. These would be the glories that have clustered together. They've come together. We spoke about the title of the chapter, Heralds of the Morning. We're not sure what the herald is, what the morning is, but the heralds, in the plural, they're things that foretell. We've got watchman, prophecy, a trumpet, and we also highlighted that this is someone who is preceding a king. That's essentially what the job of a herald is, someone who warns you that someone of royalty or of position is just about to come. We mentioned John the Baptist. We didn't actually read the passages, although we read 2 verses from Isaiah. We didn't read from Malachi, and I'm suggesting the book of Malachi is introducing the role of Christ as a priest, not a king. You can pick up his kingship in Isaiah, as well as his sacrificial role, but we read from Isaiah 35 and Isaiah 40, and particularly in chapter 40, verses 3 and 4, I think it was. You can see that it's not a herald that is being introduced there, but a workman, someone who repairs the road ahead of this royal personage. So we dealt with all of that, and Brother Tyler's not here. Brother Tyler spoke about the effect of every vision. Do you remember that? He said this sounds like the effect of every vision to him, and that's found where, Sister Rachel? Verse? Can't remember? Did you have it in your notes? Okay, so we went to Ezekiel 12, 21 to 23, and I did a little picture here, and he said he agreed with that, and so did a couple of other students, that we gave examples of Moses, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and they're all dealing with a singular event here. This is just an example. All of them are real examples. We didn't go to any particular Bible passage in any of those books. And all of these 3 prophets are dealing with a singular event in the book of Ezekiel chapter 12. It's the effect of every vision, and the word effect essentially means the fulfillment. So all of these things are going to be fulfilled. The book of Ezekiel is dealing with the destruction of Jerusalem. So all of these prophets are dealing with that singular event. And did we get any further than that? I don't think so. Anybody's notes say any? I think that's as far as we got. So I don't know if we all agree with this, that this is that this story is portraying this concept here about the clustering of the glories. Has anybody had a chance to think about that? No? Sorry?
I'm not sure I'm following you as far as the cluster being people.
That was just an example. They could be anything.
Okay.
Yeah, they could be books, Bible verses, anything. I just put people there just as a concept that we could all think about. A group of people who come together as a singular group, so they're clustering. It can be anything. It doesn't have to be people. Sister Bromwell?
When you said it's a component,
at the very end where they're coming all together?
This one?
Yeah, you said it's a component, but
A component.
I don't know what the word it says. One moment. That's what it was. It was one.
Oh, one moment, yeah.
So, is that a singular point in time, or are you not defining that at this point?
So, if you're going to go to Ezekiel 12, the event is the destruction of Jerusalem, which is essentially a singular event, but there are steps that bring you to that point, because Tyler didn't want to be pinned down to say it's a particular day where that destruction happens. He wanted to keep it in a generic sense that it's the destruction of Jerusalem. (301) paragraph 3. Around his coming cluster the glories of that restitution of all things which God hath spoken by the mouth of all his holy prophets since the world began. We haven't quite finished that sentence. I don't know if anybody's got any more thoughts on that, because we haven't really tied in what the restitution of all things is and how it relates to the clustering of the glories. So, but if Sister Tess?
I don't get what the clustering is in your bottom picture.
Okay, so I'm not saying that's right. I'm saying that's what Brother Tyler said. So you suggesting that
I don't see a cluster.
it doesn't look correct?
A cluster gives the idea that it's not all at one point. If you have a cluster, they're not actually connected.
Okay, so we'll pick that up now then, now that you've brought it to our attention. I was going to wait a bit because no one else made a comment on it. Does everybody understand what she's saying? Who does? Sister Kathy, what is she saying?
Well, a cluster is like a cluster of grapes, and they all join together. And that doesn't look like a cluster. It is at one point, but not together.
Did that help, Brother Richard?
No.
That didn't help.
Okay, sorry.
Have another go.
Okay. Okay, let me say how I see. I see the clusters of the gathering is of the previous paragraphs listing the prophets as an example from this chapter.
That's what you see clustering as?
Well, yes, because they're all, it says about his coming cluster. So these prophets and truths are all pointing to his coming.
Isn't that what that says?
Yes.
And you disagree with that? But you've just used evidence to
That it is.
yeah, so because I could change that to Job if you wanted me to, and Psalms, which is what your evidence was.
Yeah.
You said the paragraphs before, all of those prophets are clustering,
Around.
and now you've said, so the evidence that you used was mitigating against.
Yeah, well, maybe we need more explanation than that.
Okay, my sister?
I could not hear what Tess was saying.
Okay, this is a really large room, and I know you struggle to hear my voice, but I struggle to hear your voice as well, and it probably isn't getting picked up on the microphone. So what she's saying is, this diagram got introduced because Brother Tyler said all of this chapter, as far as we read, looks like the effect of every vision. I don't know if you remember him saying that. So I said, what does that mean? Let's go to the Bible verse. So we went to the Bible verse. So I drew out what I thought he was saying. And I said, let me draw this out. Do you, Tyler, understand this verse in this fashion? And he says, yes. So I gave an example. I gave 3 prophets, and all these prophets do speak about the destruction of Jerusalem. And they're all visions. So I've got V1 to V3, and these visions are all talking about this event here. So I said, is that an example of what we're seeing here? And he said yes, and a couple of other people said yes, it was. So Sister Tess has just said her understanding of about his coming cluster the glories of that restitution of all things, this diagram does not match that sentence. That's what she said. So Sister Kathy said she agreed. So I said, well, explain that. And the evidence she gave actually said that she does agree this is correct. So I don't know if you picked up that bit as well.
Well, can I say,
You go ahead.
for one thing, you're talking about, those prophets are talking about the destruction of Jerusalem, and this sentence is saying that the cluster is about the glories of the second coming. I do not see it.
Let me do this then.
Okay, do something different.
He gave the example, so I just drew what he said. It's a concept, so we could change this to the second coming. If that's all you're saying, it's not the event that was that is in question. It's the structure of what we're reading. So what I try to do is do a pictorial representation of what we read. It's not so much the event itself, because this was the destruction of Jerusalem, but it could have well been the second coming. And so Sister Kathy said, so I don't mean to rub it in, that she didn't agree with this. And I said, okay, explain why you disagree. So she said, we won't go to Moses, Isaiah, or Jeremiah. If you go to the paragraphs before this one that we're reading, 301 paragraph 3, you can go to Job, I don't know, Revelation, Acts. You can go to all these Bible prophets, and what they're doing is, so I'll give an example. The Apostle Paul, speaking by the Spirit of inspiration, testified, the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel. So I could have put 1 Thessalonians here, and Paul, and he would have been having a vision that targeted the second coming. So it's mainly the structure that I'm drawing here, because someone gave me that example. It's not the event itself. So the question is this correct? And some people are saying no, and some people are saying yes. I don't know if you have an opinion.
Well, my opinion is that these men all preached the second coming. So they would be each one would be one of the grapes on the cluster.
Okay? And that's what that sort of picture work is showing. All these men are clustering here. Sister Tess said that's not correct. And some people have an opinion, some people don't. No, she didn't say why.
Let's hear what
But when I asked who agreed with her, you said, so I asked you why.
So now I need to know why now.
Okay. Brother Bob,
I don't want to confuse the issue at all.
please don't.
No, I'm not going to, but I see, if you look at the cluster as being, as an example, people, the people are clustering around the truth. That's what they're clustering on. And all the prophets have been writing about the truth, and at one level or another, they're all pointing to the consummation here at the end of time. And so it is clustering, in my estimation. And if you look at the early chapters in Great Controversy, she talks clearly about the destruction that took place literally of Jerusalem of old, and says that that is the destruction of the world. It represents the destruction of the world. So it is right at Christ's second coming. So they're the same event. It just, or even the destruction of Jerusalem points to the time of the end. You know, when the whole world is in that condition and destroyed.
Okay, so what you did was you took the story of Ezekiel and you made an application at the end of the world based upon Great Controversy chapter 1, I think, which is fine, but we didn't need to do that just because I don't want us to get bogged down on what that waymark was. It's just the fact that it is a waymark, because we could have taken the first few paragraphs and I could have said that was the second advent, and you would have developed the same structure. Yeah. Any other comments?
Can we take each of those prophets and put instead dates? Like 1840, April 44, July 44.
You've asked me the question, and I asked the questions.
I'm asking the class.
No, you don't ask the class questions. I ask the class questions.
Okay.
You just answer them. What you think.
Well, I guess I'm thinking that can be done just the same. Like this is how I'm understanding what's being presented, is the clustering of glories pointing to these events that the Millerites went through. And maybe I'm jumping way too far ahead, so maybe I should just stop talking now.
No,
Okay.
I'm not saying not to stop. So everything that we've read before that, you're saying that's not what's being discussed?
I'm not saying that.
Because all of those things are pointing to just one event.
The second coming.
Do you agree with that?
Yes.
And you're saying the clustering is not that?
I'm saying that the Millerites pointed to the second coming.
No, but I'm asking about the clustering. It says about his coming cluster glories, and obviously the title of the chapter is Heralds of the Morning,
Right.
because we're trying to understand what the heralds are, if they're the clusters, and you're saying they're not what we've just read.
I didn't think I was contradicting what we were reading.
You just said time of the end, April the 19th. They're not.
Time of the end,
Oh, you didn't? I thought you did.
April 1840.
Okay, sorry, 1840. So 1840 and April 19th are not Second Advent.
No, but they're pointing to it. They're the times when.
But every single prophet that she's just given to us isn't doing any of that. All those prophets that came centuries before are all pointing to that event. So all I asked was that the passages that we've just read are not in reference to this sentence that we're dealing with.
Because those prophets are speaking to the destruction of Jerusalem.
No, don't get confused about that. They're all talking about the second advent. I can just change those three. The structure would remain the same.
So then the Millerites weren't pointing to the second advent? That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm seeing, is that they, in the midnight cries, in the behold the bridegroom cometh, in everything that they were presenting.
I'm not arguing that. All I'm saying is the paragraphs that we've just read,
Right.
Acts 1:11, 1 Thessalonians 4:16, Revelation 1:7, are all talking about one event.
And
Is that right?
yes. And that's where, okay, so each of those events.
No, it's not each of those events. There's only one event all of those prophets are talking about.
Right, but where I was referencing the Millerites, and like in 1840, they were pointing to April.
They were pointing to April in 1839, 1837, 1836. Why you pick 1840?
Because that was one of the dates that stood out as a marker for the Millerites to be spreading the message, to be participating in the midnight cry.
I don't think, my question was rhetorical. It wasn't, because I know you know what 1840 is, but I'm saying, why did you pick 1840? Because all you're doing is picking a random date and saying that random date here is targeting this event. And that's all the evidence that we have in the paragraphs before isn't doing that in the way that you just said.
Because I'm taking knowledge that I have outside of this paragraph and trying to apply it.
I'm going to tell Brother Daniel.
See, I told you, you should have just told me to stop talking. I'm jumping too far ahead.
Any other comments? Nope. Sister Tess, did you want to make a comment? You don't want to tell us what you're saying there? I don't know. Oh, Brother Richard? Oh, he wants you to.
I'm not sure if I'm lost now, but I just don't see a cluster anywhere in that. Moses, Isaiah, Jeremiah, none of them are a cluster. When I think of cluster, my first thought was stars. Every star, or if we go back to the idea of grapes, every grape is its own autonomous unit. And if we bring that into, if we try and make that one moment, one event, it doesn't fit. And for me, if we look at the prophets, it doesn't fit, there is no cluster in that part of it.
Okay, if that didn't make any sense,
These prophets all had something in common. They all were partaker of the divine nature, and that makes them fit the cluster. And they were all prophesying about the second coming. That makes them fit the cluster.
okay, what we'll do is we'll read on.
Okay.
If we're okay with that, Brother Nathan?
Oh, I was thinking how I could reword this sentence so that it can make a little bit more sense. And because I had a little bit of trouble with the glories of that, I think there's an emphasis on that, and glories of go together. So I would restate, if I were to rewrite the sentence another way, I would say, the glories of the truths about his second coming cluster, the glories of the truths about his second coming cluster over that restitution of all things, if that makes sense.
That's a totally different thought.
Am I understanding it wrong?
You might be, just because someone disagrees. Doesn't mean you're wrong.
I'm saying the glories of are the truths that the prophets are understanding, that are pointing to. I agree with the model that you.
Okay, so we're going to read on. We'll read on.
Okay.
Next paragraph. 302, paragraph 1. So all she's going to do now in this paragraph is just a quote from Isaiah 51, actually a few chapters. It is then that the peaceful and long-desired kingdom of the Messiah shall be established under the whole heaven. And then she's going to give proof text to that. Next paragraph. Coming of the Lord has been in all ages the hope of his true followers. The Saviour's parting promise upon Olivet that he would come again lighted up the future for his disciples, filling their hearts with joy and hope that sorrow could not quench nor trials dim. Amid suffering and persecution, the appearing of the great God and our Saviour Jesus Christ was the blessed hope. And then she's going to quote from 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, where they were having this problem. I'm sure we're all aware of the problem that they had, that they weren't sure about the coming of Christ, and they were getting distraught because people are already dying and they thought they were going to be the final generation. They're very familiar with that problem that they have there. And then Paul has to tell them that Christ isn't going to come anytime soon. So he was already aware of this problem back in the first century, that Christ was not going to come until the man of sin should be revealed, centuries into the future. Next paragraph. She's going to quote from Revelation 22:20. Next paragraph. Now she's going to she comes out of Bible history, and now she's going to start dealing with the New Testament church, the reformers and men that God's raised up during the Dark Ages. This is page 302, paragraph 4. It begins, from the dungeon, the stake, the scaffold, where saints and martyrs witness for the truth, comes down the centuries the utterance of their faith and hope. Again, talking about the resurrection. Next paragraph. Luther declared, I persuade myself verily that the day of judgment shall not be absent full 300 years. Does anybody know approximately where Martin Luther is? It's historically the dates.
500 years ago.
Someone else said?
15.
1500.
So he's born 1483 and he dies 1546. So obviously he didn't say this when he was born, and it was before his death. And he says, I'm persuaded that the day of judgment will not be absent full 300 years. God cannot suffer this wicked world much longer. The great day is drawing near in which the kingdom of abominations shall be overthrown. So, where would 300 years take you? So this would be 1846. This one? No, it's not. I'm just giving his birth and his death. It'll be in between that. So he's predicting that Christ is going to come around that kind of time frame. He doesn't really have any prophetic model, at least not one that I'm aware of. He must know something to actually mark the 300. I'm guessing that he's using the 1260 to do that, without fully understanding 508, 538 with the precision that we do. But he seems to be talking about that kind of history. Don't be confused by the wide gap, because he doesn't write this when he's 20. He's quite old, so it's a lot narrower, a lot tighter. It's almost certain that it's in the 1800s for sure. So it's not as vague as we might. It might appear on the board. We could go back and check. She tells you the book that it's from, and you could see the publication of the book, and we could work it out. So she's going on now to the Reformers, talking about this event. I don't know if you remember this morning when we spoke about the heralds. There was a suggestion that maybe this is talking about the heralds may have been the Protestant Reformation, but she's only using the Protestant Reformation as another example of all of these people that are talking about the Second Advent. Then she quotes from Knox, the next paragraph, and then Baxter. So that's GC 303, paragraph 4. She goes from Luther, Melanchthon, Knox, Baxter. Next paragraph, 304, paragraph 1. Prophecy not only foretells the manner and object of Christ's coming, but presents tokens by which men are to know when it is near. Now she's going to quote from Luke 21 and Mark 13. Perhaps the one that you're most familiar with is Matthew 24. Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21 are all the same conversation. They're all the same event. Prophecy not only foretells the manner and object of Christ's coming, but presents tokens by which men are to know when it is near. Jesus said, there shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars. Luke 21:25. The sun shall be darkened and the moon shall not give a light, and the stars of heaven shall fall, and the powers that are in heaven shall be shaken. And then shall they see the Son of Man come in the clouds with great power and glory. So she switches to Mark 13. The Revelator thus describes the first of the signs to precede the second advent. And she's going to go to Revelation 6, verse 12, to pick up the earthquake, the Lisbon earthquake. So we want to look at the sentence, prophecy not only foretells the manner and object of Christ's coming, but presents tokens by which men are to know when it is near. How do we read that sentence? Sister Rachel.
I think that prophecy shows us way
You need
more.
to project your voice because I don't want you to get you turned around, but people won't hear you at the back.
I think that prophecy shows you waymarks to help you know when the event is near.
Okay, so prophecy shows you waymarks to know when the event is near.
Like the tokens would be events or something to help you see that what is predicted is about to come to pass.
So if I tell me if I'm drawing what you just said. Here's the second advent, and you said that there's, I think you used the word predictions.
Yeah.
So we've got these predictions that are all targeting this. Is that what you said? The predictions are talking about that. And then you said there's tokens.
What I was thinking was that the prophecy was predicting the tokens that you would see.
So that's wrong? That picture work?
I'm not sure as far as visually.
If you can do it with words.
I think that the prophecy is telling you of, it says tokens, like waymarks or events that you can see, which shows that prophecy, what it is predicting, is about to be fulfilled.
Prophecy not only foretells the manner and object of Christ's coming. So is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah? You're okay with that one? Then it says, but presents tokens by which men are to know when it is near. So what do I need to draw for that?
That's a sign. Token is a sign.
I was just going to let her do it.
I don't know how to draw it. I just think that the prophecy is telling you of something that's going to come to pass, showing that
When?
before whatever was predicted happened.
So that's what's being predicted.
Yeah,
So I've got tokens before.
yeah.
So I'll do that.
Yeah.
Okay? And then what do I want to do? Prophecy not only,
The object.
it not only tells you the manner and object of Christ's coming, so it doesn't only do this, what else does it do?
It tells you what the tokens are.
So I'll do this then. And you want me to point to these tokens?
Yeah.
Is that how you see that sentence?
Yes.
Sorry, my sister.
I just wanted to point out that tokens is just a sign that you're on the right track. We've had tokens in this movement and it just verifies that we're on the right track. The prophecies are correct,
So,
but the prophecy is not predicting a token. And in a sense, it's predicting tokens, but not specific tokens.
so do you agree with this first bit here, where it says, prophecies, I take the word not only, prophecies foretell the manner and object of Christ's coming. So that's what that top line says. Do you agree with that? But it says it doesn't only do that. Not only does it do that, so it must be doing something else. Do you agree with that? Is that how you read that? So what else does it do? So prophecy not only foretells the manner of Christ's coming, but presents tokens or signs by which men will know that the object or the coming of Christ is near. So how would you draw that then?
We've had lots of tokens about doubling lately.
Okay, so I've got tokens here. And those tokens, how are you connected? Because it says prophecy not only does that, but it also presents tokens.
It's not a specific token, it's something that God does.
I guess what I'm asking is, how do you read when it says, I'll rephrase the sentence as I see it, prophecy presents tokens. Is that a fair reading? What does that mean if that prophecy presents tokens?
Gives signs.
So prophecy gives signs. So I think that's what that says. This prophecy, when you say gives signs, you're saying it doesn't mean identifies them.
Well, it doesn't say that it identifies them necessarily in this particular. I mean, we do know that the sun, moon, and stars were identified as tokens, but they were also predictions, right?
So you're seeing foretelling differently to presenting, because prophecy foretells the second coming and prophecy presents tokens. And so you're saying foretelling and presenting don't mean the same thing, where Sister Rachel says they essentially mean the same thing.
Yep.
She says prophecies are presenting, which means prophecies are foretelling the tokens, and you're reading it differently. I'm not saying you have to agree, I'm just trying to understand how you're reading that sentence. Brother James. Okay.
It might be one discrepancy is the way that it's presented on the board is you have one prophet talking about the second advent and a different prophet talking about a token, where with the example of Jesus, he's talking about the second advent and the token at the same time.
So we could put verse numbers here. It would still be the same
But just the way it looks.
concept.
It looks like it's separate people saying just separate things.
Because I was going to just put P1 over here, but I couldn't do that because it wouldn't be, I mean, if I've got a prophecy in chapter 1 verse 26, it can't be hitting two events. It can only be hitting one event. So it'd have to be the next verse, verse 27. So this could still be one prophet, but it still have to be two different verses. But that doesn't tell us what...
Saying that what might be
Okay.
what people are seeing.
How do you see that? Do you agree with that? Is that how you read that sentence? So you're saying fulfill means present, essentially. Who said something?
Foretell is, didn't you say, you said fulfill or?
Oh, foretells. I mean foretell. Sorry, thank you. Sister Bronwyn.
I don't believe they're the same thing. But
So how do you read?
prophecy does two things. It foretells and it presents. There's two different things.
In the context, it's two different things.
So prophecy foretells. You agree with that bit? Okay, so it's the other bit about the tokens. What's the relationship between prophecy and tokens?
In this paragraph, it's a prophecy. When the sun, moon, and stars do these certain things, you'll know.
When prophecy, you can't say when prophecy does something.
There will be signs and you will know. So in this paragraph, it combines them together. I don't know why she would separate them out in the first sentence if she wanted to combine them together later on in the passage.
So Brother James was saying that to separate these infers that it may be different persons giving this prophecy, but it could be the same. But I'm saying you have to separate them because whatever's being spoken of here isn't the same thing that's being spoken of here. Do you agree with that? So this prophecy is dealing with this. Is there a prophecy that's dealing with this token?
Yeah, there is.
Yes.
Two different prophecies.
But a prophecy by definition is a prediction of something that's about to happen. It's not the only way to understand prophecy. Because you can't put the prophecy... Let me ask another question. Is this saying that the tokens, whenever that statement was made, have not arrived yet?
In Luke's time, they had not arrived.
So even though they use these two different words, foretell and present, it seems to... I don't want to drive you into saying that they're saying the same thing, but it seems like you're conceding that they do. Brother Daniel.
I don't know if I'm wrong on that, but the way I read that in a simple manner is like this. Like you have the 10 years war of Afghanistan before the time of Biant. For me, that's a sign of the prophecy that's going to be fulfilled. So like the same thing we apply for today. We have a war now in Syria, and that's a sign, that's a token of Raphia. So the way I see that in a simple level is like we have this sign that is saying, hey, it's near the prophecy to be fulfilled. Just like in the second angel's message, you have the enemies that always are working before you have the second hand, like the foundation and things like this. So the prophecy are the waymarks, and I don't know if the token are these events that are a sign of the waymark that's coming. But yeah, I don't know.
So you mentioned the 10-year Afghan war. Is there a prophecy about that 10-year war?
I don't know. I don't think so. Nobody should.
Okay, so you don't know of one.
Yeah, I don't know.
So how did you create the 10-year war as meaning anything? When did you create that? Sorry?
I didn't create that.
You mentioned it, so whoever you, the movement, doesn't have to be you.
Yeah, I know. I looked at just as like we don't need to use the 10 years war. If you look to the waymarks, you have the waymarks and you have the things attached to the waymarks, and I think that's the things.
The 10-year war is waymarks, isn't it?
Is it? Okay.
79 is the waymark. No? 89?
I think the waymarks are the 700s, and I think time of the end, 1989, that's the waymark, and then the increase of knowledge.
But you picked up 10 years. As soon as you do 10 years, you've got two waymarks.
Yeah, okay, we have the foundation, like the foundation after the second angel's message, actually after the first angel message is empowered. And where is the waymark of that? It's a period of time where the foundations are laid, and I think that's attached to the waymark.
Okay, yeah, I'm not arguing that a period of time, but it's still bookend by waymarks. They're still attached to waymarks.
Yeah, so I think that's the token of the waymark.
My only question is, you gave one example, the 10-year Afghan war.
Yeah.
Is that spoken about in prophecy? Well, then you're going to say no. As far as you know, it's not. So when she makes this sentence, this introductory sentence, she says, there shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars. What is that sentence talking about?
Sign, yeah, they are waymarks, but it's sign that this is coming.
No, the signs is the Bible passage. She gives the introductory thought. What word would you pick up when it says the sun, moon and stars? What are they? The sun, moon and stars.
Sign.
That's the Bible verse. but we're in the great controversy. Or are you just going to stick with signs?
Yeah, token.
Sorry?
Token.
Tokens, so you want to make them tokens.
Yeah.
So, before they happened, was there a prediction or a prophecy that they would happen that was readable?
Yeah.
In the same way, was there a readable passage of inspiration that said there's going to be a 10-year Afghan war, or you're going to have 1979? No, your answer is no. Was there a Bible passage that said there's going to be 1989?
Yeah.
Yes. Daniel 11 verse 40, Daniel chapter 5, all of that stuff is, you can work it out long before 1989 comes, but you can't find 1979. So the way you're using 1979 as a token is not the way that she's using it here, because she's using these tokens that were prophesied before.
Yeah, got it.
So the 10-year Afghan war is a token, but it's not a very effective token in the way we use it. But we should have seen that war, even though we didn't know it was a 10-year war, we should have known that war was a token of the time of the end coming. As a church, should we not have known that?
So that should have a prophecy about that.
Okay, so if you know it should be a token, then you should have a prophecy about that.
Wars and rumors of wars. That was the prophecy.
Yeah, but then you'd pick up any and every war.
Exactly.
So that wouldn't work, would it? So if we're going to make that as a token, what is it a token of? At a basic level, it's a token of the time of the end. It may, the way Ellen White would use it, it wouldn't be. I don't think. But if we say it's a time of the end, then that means you must have a prophecy about it, otherwise it doesn't serve its purpose. And if it doesn't serve its purpose, no one can be held accountable for it. And you're inferring that people are going to be held accountable for it. At least the movement has, haven't they? So that must mean there must be a prophecy about it. And if you're saying, well, you don't know, that means, like, we don't know, how can we blame the other folks, the leaders? How can we blame them if we don't even know? Because that's our accusation, isn't it? They were required to know. What's the license for having a token before the time of the end? A story, another story.
You're right. The first two signs was before the time of the end.
Yeah, but that's our history.
Okay. I don't know.
Oh, sorry, that's, you're meaning 1989?
No, I was talking about 1788. You have two signs.
Oh, no, but you're talking about 1989.
Okay.
I'm saying, what's the evidence that we should have seen tokens? So one of them is the Millerite history. They had tokens, we should have tokens. Another one? The flood. So what's the token for the flood?
Methuselah died.
When does Methuselah die?
About the year of the flood. Somebody here might be able to correct me.
No, they won't correct you, because it's correct. So the year he dies, which is the year of the flood, that's at the end.
But it's before it happens, though.
Yeah, but it's long before the time of the end. Sorry, long after the time of the end. I'm asking about one that would be here. We'd have to have a token before the story starts. In fact, in the story of Noah, I don't know if anybody does know, maybe they could tell us, where we even mark the time of the end. The flood. Noah's flood.
He starts preaching.
Sorry?
120 years before he starts preaching.
Because we normally mark the 120 years as 9/11.
Methuselah dies
Doesn't Methuselah die at the end? I thought we just.
He does.
So I'm saying, if I build the boat is like this, where you begin, and the 120 would begin here. This would be 9/11 if you were going to do that. So I don't know what the time of the end is. Maybe the thoughts of men's hearts were evil continually, perhaps. But I don't know if there's a sign before that. That's what I'm asking, and sign before that. Another story. It's a really easy one.
Line of Christ.
Line of Christ. So what's the token there, the sign?
John the Baptist.
If we're going to make the time of the end, two men, which you tend to nowadays, would mark, because they're born in the same year, would mark both of them as the time of the end, the birth of John, the birth of Christ. Someone said the star? Yeah? The star is the one that is the easy one to see in the story of Christ's birth. It's a token that he's going to be born. Is that a fair one or not? That's after his birth? Oh, so we can't use that one?
Prophesying before while they're pregnant.
Prophesying before they're pregnant. Yeah? Okay, so we're struggling with you, Brother Daniel, that we can't find any story that really showed you clearly that there's going to be a token beforehand, except the Millerite one.
The conception of a baby.
The conception, I think that's what, Brother Graham said. The conception, the fact that things happen in the 6th month. Prophecy not only foretells the manner and object of Christ's coming, but presents tokens by which men are to know when it is near. Are these tokens connected to the heralds? Connected to the clustering of the glories? Or are they unrelated? Brother Bob?
I think they're connected because they're truths or things that are going to happen, and they're told ahead of time. So I think they're connected. I mean, I've got another reference here that ties some of this together.
I'd rather not use it yet,
Okay.
so we can stretch ourselves a little bit further. Brother Richard.
Yeah, I think they're connected because
When I mean connected, I mean, are they the same thing? Because I want to know, am I allowed to say heralds equals glories equals tokens? That's what I mean. Are they connected? Are they the same thing? Are they synonyms?
for now, I believe so. I think so. And I'm saying that because of like you just talked about how Luther, he said within 300 years, for about 300 years, this is gonna take place. And I'm seeing that prior to the time of the end, because that's when the reformers, Wycliffe and Luther, they were heralds. I mean, Wycliffe even called the
Here's Luther. So is Luther the herald?
I would say yes.
Is Luther the token?
I don't know if he'd be the token.
You just said the herald is the glory, is the token. You said I'll work with that. And you've just drawn a diagram that you're saying Luther would be a herald, but he's not a token. So then you disagree with that.
But as far as the what he's saying will come to a fulfillment,
Which is what?
prophecy.
Which is what? What's he prophesying?
Prophesying of this.
So Luther would be up here. Luther is not predicting a token,
Oh,
is he?
if I was thinking more along the lines of what they, what they're saying, and then the fulfillment of it.
What they're saying is Christ is going to come. That's what all of those passages that she talks about is doing for us.
Yes, but you also have other things that maybe it's not in the passage that we read, but maybe I inserted it there. But you have things that have to take place before the second coming that they prophesy about also.
That's the whole point. It's how, what we want to do is we want to follow what Ellen White is trying to teach us. Because we shouldn't be inserting our own thoughts and ideas into the passage because we think we know what she's trying to teach us. We should let her teach us. And she hasn't done that at all. All she's done is given us the title, The Heralds. She talks about the clustering of events that surround this. And I wanted to know, what does it mean when you have, not events, glories, the clustering of glories, what does that mean? Someone attempted to make it look like this, which we're not too sure about. And now we're 4 pages into the chapter, and now she says, prophecy not only foretells the manner and object of Christ's coming. If we put a stop there, she's just giving a summary of everything that she's just said. Because every prophecy that she's just quoted is dealing with one subject, isn't it? It's not talking about the tokens at all. It's only talking about one subject. It says the prophecies deal with that, but they also deal with something else. They also deal with the tokens. And the example of Luther's doing this top one, he's not doing this bottom one. In the example that she gives. But now she says, it doesn't only deal with the event, it also deals with the tokens or the signs that precede the event. And none of the examples that she gave did that, except now when she quotes Luke 21:25. Now she introduces the subject of what the tokens would be. Does that make sense? We agree with that? So, I think people still didn't understand what Sister Tess was saying, but if the clustering or these glories is the tokens, if it is that, we'll put the heralds to one side, then this picture work would be wrong, wouldn't it? Because this picture work is only dealing with this. It doesn't tackle the tokens. So if we were to go to this story here, and we said this was the destruction of Jerusalem as an example, what would be a token of that? Don't have to give me a Bible verse, just give me, if we know the story well enough, what would be a token that Jerusalem is about to be destroyed? They're going to get their grappling hooks and they're going to bring those walls down. There must be a token of that. I'm not saying there must be, but I'm saying is there? The siege.
That's a siege.
Okay, that's what you can say? So the siege would be a token. So the question is, for it to be a prophetic token, I mean, if someone's going to besiege you, you know things are going to go bad. Perhaps they may not go bad. For it to be an effective token, you'd have to have some kind of prophecy, I think. If you don't, then what you're going to rely upon is that you have this event that's happening and it's a harbinger, perhaps, of what's about to happen, but maybe you're not 100% sure. So we've got the siege. What other ones do we have? Whether we know a prophecy about them or not. Planting a flag. Daniel chapter 1 verse 1. All the royal boys have gone. So we'll go with those two. We'll go with, I'll put Kim here, and I'll put S for siege. So these two, for sure, they're pointing to this event. We agree with that. Just the common sense would teach you that. Now, if they were tokens that this is going to happen, what do we need to have that they become effective tokens? You have to have prophecies that target these, because otherwise I'm going to say they just took Daniel, and people say things happen, you know, it looks bad, but we serve a God that would not allow the church to be destroyed. We're the only church. The Babylonians are his enemies. This would never happen, can't happen. So it's just an anomaly, and everything's going to be okay. Maybe we'll negotiate and get them back. But if it was a prophecy, then we can say, no, this is a fulfillment of prophecy, and because it's been fulfilled, now we know that this is going to happen. And especially when you get a clustering of those things. So if we were picking up a clustering of the glories or a clustering of the tokens, then you know that the event is going to happen. Brother James.
Would the death of Hananiah be a token?
So the death of Hananiah, was that predicted? So it gets predicted, so that would be a token. So where would it be? Here? In between them? So I put Hananiah. Hananiah is a bit of a funny one. Who predicts his death? So it's a current prophet, and the current prophets are not prophets, are they really? Because nobody accepts them as prophets. That's why they're even having the argument. Because Hananiah is not saying, you know what, I don't agree with Moses. Because no one's going to disagree with the prophets that came before, because they're established truth. They're going to disagree with Jeremiah, because they say, you're not even a prophet. You're just kind of someone who stands up and does his own thing. But if we took him as a prophet, then he's going to predict it. But people aren't going to believe Hananiah's death. I mean, they could just put it down to wizardry or something. But it is valid, yes. Jehoiakim. Where would we go for that one? It's going to give someone else a chance first. Because I need you knew. Leviticus 26. So, we've got Leviticus 26. You could get to that and someone will stand up and say, see those boys who have just been taken? That was a fulfillment of Leviticus 26. And if Leviticus 26 is fulfilled, partially, the rest of it's going to happen. The siege. Brother Theodore?
Well, you got Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28. And Ezekiel as well.
I want to go to, we'll just do the Ezekiel one.
Okay, do the Ezekiel. So that's Ezekiel 4, verse 4 to 6.
Okay, so Ezekiel 4, Ezekiel's going to get a tablet and he's going to draw a picture work of what's about to happen based upon a prediction that goes all the way back to the separation of Israel. And we've got Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28. So I think this is why Sister Tess was saying the original picture work was not in agreement with this or the passage that we read, if I understood her correctly. So we'll go back and summarise, but before we do that, just want to ask if people got questions or they've got comments. Before I go back and summarise where I think we've got to. I'm not sure if we're all in 100% agreement with what I'm saying, so I want to give you an opportunity to comment. Sister Bromley.
So all tokens must have prophecies, but must all prophecies have tokens?
So, here's this prophecy here. Prophecy is that Christ is going to come. So once you've established that, your question is, once you're prophesying this event, does that event itself have to have a token connected to it? So that was part one of, that was part one and part, that was one of the questions. The other one was, do all tokens have to have a prophecy attached to them? So you say no? Why no?
I believe that we're told that there's going to be tokens in our day, but we're not told what they are.
Okay, so there's going to be a token next week, and
No, it's not stated when.
no, I'm just saying it happened next week. It's going to happen next week. Obviously it's not been stated. So when say today, something happened today. How do we know that that would be a token?
It would be connected to a prophecy, right?
I didn't catch that. Sorry.
It would have to be connected to some kind of prophecy about it.
So the problem is sometimes we're not clued up on inspiration well enough to anticipate the token, and because we're not au fait with inspiration to the degree that we should be, sometimes those tokens sneak up on us. So the token could have come and gone, and we look back and we say that was a token there and we missed it. And so the question is, how do you know it's a token? Then you have to go back and say, because now we've found the evidence. So it's our weakness, our frailty, and I don't want to make any excuses for that, that we should know the prophecies before the tokens so that they can be effective tokens. Because otherwise they become pretty impudent, weak tokens, because nobody even sees what's happening. And you gave an example of 9/11, and that's probably the most classic example in our movement, that we just didn't see it coming. And afterwards we sort of like said, of course we should have seen it coming. The question is, post 9/11, are the tokens that we need to, that are there, should we be seeing them before they come? If we are, then we of necessity need to know the prophecies that are attached to them. So I'm suggesting that the second part of your question, Sister Bronwyn, is all tokens must have a prophecy attached to them, otherwise they're not really effective tokens. It's like, well, you know that ship that sunk today, or that disaster that happened, it may just be time and chance. Who knows why it was there? Who knows what relevance it has to end time prophecy? If it's not attached to something, then it doesn't really serve a purpose as a token. Now we may find out afterwards, say, oh yeah, that was a token and we didn't realize it. But to have it that it would be a token and it was never mentioned, I'm not sure if that would fit the criteria.
My question was, aren't the judgments in the land, aren't those tokens in a sense? Because we're told that when the judgments are in the land, the people will learn righteousness, and we've seen lots of judgments. So that's kind of a token that's kind of predicted to you, but they're not specific.
So if they're not specific, are they
Specific, like exactly what they are and where they're going to hit. But we are told that, you know, the port cities will be hit, like New Orleans was hit, New York City, that kind of thing. So we can look at those as tokens.
in a general sense? What do people think? Does everybody agree that they're tokens?
You just said they had to be attached to a prophecy that we recognized before. You just said
You agreed?
you said it.
I think Matthew's the same. There should be wars and rumours of wars. And the White predicts, great natural disasters. The Bible speaks about that. So there are prophecies that connect them or predict them, but they're pretty vague. So when you say wars and rumours of wars, do you think they're vague or they're specific?
Pretty vague. But I'm not sure where, I don't know.
Brother Daniel.
What is the difference of the prophecies that are fulfilled as a token and the prophecy that is fulfilled as the second coming?
Tokens come first.
What are the difference of the prophecy that is fulfilled as a token and the prophecy that is fulfilled to the second coming?
Okay. Sister Kathy, what's the difference between prophecies that talk about the second coming and prophecies that talk about tokens? What's the difference?
Tokens come before the second advent.
Is that simple enough?
Seems straightforward.
Kind of?
No?
No.
Because they tell you they're near.
Okay, so 9/11 is what? Is a token or?
Okay, is 9/11 the second advent?
No, okay. But we can apply the second advent to other waymarks, doesn't we? No.
Can you?
I don't know. I think so. I think so. Why not?
Why not? You could do anything.
We have a second coming for our generation, for the priest. So the second coming for the priest is Panium.
Okay, so if you're going to make the second advent Panium, then how did your question, what's the framework of your question?
So what is the difference of the prophecy of Panium for the prophecy of Raphael? So is there anything special for Panium that is not special for Raphael? Because Raphael is a token and Panium should be the second advent. I don't see.
It sounds to me like you're answering your own question.
Yeah.
Or I don't understand your question.
I don't see difference of the prophecies that are fulfilled in the second coming from the prophecies that are fulfilled in the token. Like it's all prophecy. They're saying, hey, it's gonna happen this, and then it happens.
So what's the purpose of the token?
Just tell that the prophecy is coming, but the token is
Not the prophecy's coming,
Yeah, the prophecy is gonna be fulfilled.
that this one's going to be fulfilled.
Yeah.
The event is going to be fulfilled.
Yeah.
That's the purpose of the tokens.
Yeah, but the token is also a prophecy that's gonna be fulfilled.
Yes.
So the only difference is that it's come before.
Yes.
To warn you.
That's the whole point.
Yeah, but that's the only. So
That's the whole point. It tells you that it's near at hand.
okay, so what is telling that the token is gonna come? Because the token is gonna be fulfilled as well. It doesn't have anything telling about the tokens. I'm just the reason I'm asking this. Let me explain.
You explain, because
Because you have the waymarks there. I think all the waymarks that we have, they are like the second coming. There is a prophecy that is talking about them. And I'm not telling that all the waymarks are the second coming.
good.
But I'm telling that all the waymarks, they are prophecies that are going to be fulfilled.
Okay.
For me, they are. So they're just
They are what?
token.
What's the purpose of them?
Just tell that Jesus is going to come.
Yeah, but what's the purpose besides that? Because you know Jesus is going to come anyway without the tokens.
Prepare.
You know that. We already know he's coming. Why do you need these?
Warning.
Sorry?
Warning.
Yeah, but why?
Because he's about to come
To prepare us.
to prepare.
Preparation.
So, by definition,
To wake us up.
to wake us up, you said some other words. Preparation. So, by definition, the tokens must occur when? In what dispensation?
When you have probation.
Yes, they have to be in probationary time. Otherwise, they serve no purpose. So yeah, there's not much difference between them, but there's a big difference between them. Because they're all about prophecies that are all going to be fulfilled, but these ones are happening in probationary time to give you an opportunity, because we're lazy or we were brought up incorrectly. Whoever we're going to blame, you have to blame someone, but you're now given an opportunity to get yourself ready for that event. Let's go to Matthew 24 verse 6. So this is just a short digression. Matthew 24 verse 6. If you're taking notes, you can put Mark 13:7, Mark 13:7, and Luke 21:9. So it's Matthew, Mark, and Luke 24:6, 13:7, 21:9. We'll just read from Matthew. This is about the wars. And ye shall hear of wars and rumours of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. So that's what the Bible verse you were quoted, my sister, yes? So it talks about the wars. He says, don't be worried. These things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. So could we say that these are tokens or harbingers? Yeah? So when it says the end is not yet, what does that mean? That part of the verse, the end is not yet. The time of the end. So if I were to do a line, 1798 you mean? So 1798, and here's wars, and it says 1798 is not yet. It's not yet 1798 in the wars. That's, yeah, I'm not saying you already know, but I just want us to think about how we're going to even approach this verse. Because it talks about wars. You agree that they're harbingers. We'll change the word to harbingers so that we get familiar with that one. These wars are predicting that the end is coming. He says, don't worry, you're going to see the wars, but it's okay, because these wars are going to warn you that the end is coming, but the end isn't here yet. So as soon as those wars hit, know that the end is coming, but it's not here yet. And you see that this end would be the time of the end. Yeah, I'm not trying to corner you. I just want to know. I just want you to explain how you read the verse.
I never read it like that before, but
Yes.
I'm thinking it might be.
Okay, I'm picking up that I thought you probably hadn't, because I'm asking you specific questions, and I know you're having to think on your feet. It doesn't matter if we're wrong, because to me it's more about the exercise of, if you open a verse and you haven't come across it before, what would we do? How would we approach the verse? So it's not about getting the right answer, it's just about the approach that we have. We'll get to the right answer, because we could do it a simple way. We could just go to the Spirit of Prophecy, Desire of Ages, chapter 69, and she'll tell you what all of this means. If you want to just make a reference of that, Desire of Ages, chapter 69, I can't remember what page it is. The whole chapter is basically dealing with this. The whole chapter in Desire of Ages is dealing with Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 20, and she'll explain actually what all of this means. So if we go to the top of the chapter, verse 1, we know Matthew 23 is the woes to the Pharisees. We're all familiar with that, I think. And just beforehand, in Matthew 21, is the second temple cleansing. So you've got the second temple cleansing, he's done that. The scribes and the Pharisees are going to come and push back, and then he's going to pronounce a woe upon them. And then verse 38, 23:38 says, "Behold, your house is left unto you desolate." What house is that? The temple. So if you kept your finger there and you went to John chapter 2, I think verse 17, I think it's 17. If you went to John 2:17, not 17, well, it's 16. "And he said unto them that sold doves, Take these things hence, make not my Father's house a house of merchandise." Same house? So this is the temple, and in verse 16 he calls it his Father's house. He takes ownership of that. And in Matthew 23:38, it now identifies the house as whose? Theirs. So it's changed ownership. So there's something changed about the relationship of that temple with God the Father, and by extension God the Son. So they had ownership in John 2, and after the second temple cleansing, because there's been no change, now they take possession of it. Then you come to chapter 24. "Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him for to show him the buildings of the temple." Why would they do that? Why would the disciples say, they've come out and they say, just turn around and look at that building and look how great it is? Why would they show Jesus how great that temple is?
They thought it was the building that made the church. It was Christ's presence that makes the church.
But why are they showing him how great it is? Sorry?
They were proud.
They were proud, but what's just happened? In verse 38.
There was a close of probation.
So Jesus has just said in verse 38, that building is now destroyed. It's desolate. I have nothing to do with it. This is not God's house. They come out of the building and they look back and they say, "We think you're wrong, Jesus. That house looks great. It's the greatest building perhaps in the world. God is not about to leave that anytime soon. We think you need to reconsider not only your approach to the gospel and how you interact with people, but what you're actually saying. You're predicting things that are not real." So now Christ responds in verse 2. Jesus said unto them, "See ye not all these things, the building? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left there one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down." So now he says, you think this building is so great, it's about to be destroyed. Verse 3. "And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be, and what shall be the sign of the coming and of the end of the world?" So what have they just mixed up? How many events? How many events are labelled are marked in verse 3? Sister Bromley says 3. 3 events. Can we all see 3 events? Tell us when these things shall be. What are these things? The destruction of the temple, the sign of thy coming, and the end of the world. So they've got these 3 events, and in their mind, they're all going to happen when? All at the same time. Why did they believe that? Because the Old Testament prophecies have already foretold what? that building is going to last right to the very end, into eternity, in fact. It's going to be there till the very end. So the temple can't be destroyed, and then you're going to have this huge gap, and then there's going to be the second advent. It can't happen that way, because they understand prophecy, they think. So they're going to put them all together. Verse 4, and Jesus answered and said unto them, take heed that no man deceive you. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and shall deceive many. And you shall hear of wars, rumors, or we read verse 6. Verse 7, nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences, earthquakes in diverse places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. So they're not the end, they're just the beginning. Then they're going to deliver you, then they shall deliver you up to be afflicted. They're going to try and kill you. They're going to be offended by you. There's going to be false prophets. Verse 13, but he that shall endure until the end, the same shall be saved. The gospel is going to be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. So in verse 6, but the end is not yet, and verse 14, the end shall come. Are they the same endings? How would you read that? If you were to proof text it, would you say that they're the same? Not sure? I'd say yes. I think you would. I think any reasonable reading of that would say yes. So the gospel is going to be preached for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. So if we were to read that, would the end be 1798? So we can see now, just a simple reading, that in verse 6, that end is not going to be speaking about the time of the end. I don't know if you can see, if you agree with that. Verse 15, when ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, then let him which be in Judea flee into the mountains, let him which is on the housetop come down. Woe unto them that are with child. Pray that your flight isn't in the winter or on the Sabbath, because there's going to be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. So verse say 15 to 20, what event is that? What's verse 15 to 20? Anybody? This is the destruction of Jerusalem. Verse 14 precedes verse 15. It's the introduction of verse 15. And the gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. What would that end be? The end of, Brother James? What's 15 to 20? What's 15 to 20?
Oh, destruction of Jerusalem.
So the end is? It's the end of Jerusalem. So verse 14 is bringing you to the destruction of Jerusalem. That's what the end is. Isn't that what one of their questions was? Tell us when all these things are going to happen, and etc., etc. And Jesus is going to get this prophecy, and he's going to mix it all up, so that unless you really know what you're reading, you just think that they're all one event, but they're not. He's going to deal with each one of their concerns or questions separately, but he's going to do it in such a way that unless you understand the prophecies and the tokens, you'll get muddled up. It's easy to get muddled up in this passage. So I'm suggesting verse 14 brings you to what date? Brother Theodore. What's 15 to 20?
So it would be the abomination of desolation spoken by Daniel the prophet. So 1798, or do you want to go to 70 AD?
It'd be 70 AD, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So I'm saying it's not 1798, it's 70. I've not put 66 in there because I'm just making the point that I understand verse 15 is 66, but it's talking about the destruction, the end. This is 70. If you kept your fingers here and went to Colossians 1:23, as you're reading Colossians 1:23, you look at 1:23 and I'm going to read 24:14. Okay? So you're going to just look at Colossians 1:23 and I'm going to read Matthew 24:14. Are we there? And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. So is Colossians 1:23 a parallel verse to Matthew 24:14? We agree with that? Yeah? They're the same history. We know what Colossians 1:23 history is, don't we? Because this is Paul. Paul's done that work, and Paul is going to do that work from the very earliest, we'd say 34. We know he doesn't do this in 34. He begins around 46 before he really begins to do his work. His first missionary tour is around 46, but we'll pick up 34 because that's when he gets converted. So in this history, we've got Colossians 1:23. Do you agree with that? The gospel is going to be taken to all the world.
Isn't this gospel talking about, in the next verse, it points you to Daniel, isn't that talking about Daniel's gospel?
You mean, you're back to Matthew 24?
Specifically, yeah, Matthew 24.
Verse 15,
14 and 15.
it says, when therefore you shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whosoever readeth let him understand. My understanding is that's Daniel 9, 26 and 27. This is the destruction of Jerusalem, not the presentation of the gospel. But verse 14 is before that event happens, the gospel is going to be taken to the world. So this is the end, and this is Matthew 24:14. And the reason why it's important to see that is because if you go back to verse 6, it says there's going to be wars and rumours of war before the end. And that end is the same end in verse 14. So these wars here are which wars? From AD 34 to AD 70. What wars are going on? Who's fighting against each other? Brother Larry? The reason why I thought I might ask you is because you're doing a devotion on the Roman emperors. And in this history, there's wars, not only nations against nations, but there's civil war going on in the Roman Empire to decide who's going to rule. So these wars, in their historical original application, are not some random wars. They're very specific, and what we would want to do, if we were going to approach this, is see what wars are happening in this history, and then what would we do? We'd make an application to them. So the reason why I mention that is because Adventists talk about wars and rumours of wars, and we could go back to First World War, Second World War, the Korean War. I don't know how many wars there have been in the last century. There's wars everywhere. And we're just saying these are just generic tokens that the second advent is coming, because we see lots of wars. And I'm saying that's not how we should be approaching this problem. The subject of wars and rumours of wars are very specific wars. They're not just any random wars. Our problem is that we don't know our history well enough, and we don't know how to make application well enough. And if we did, what we would be able to do is to say, well, the wars that Christ is talking about are not the wars here at the end of the world. She's not talking about the First and Second World War, Korean War, you know, the Cold War. It's not talking about anything like that. It's talking about these specific wars, and what we need to do is then make application correctly. And if we could do that well, if I could do it, and I'm not saying that I can, I could say that, you know, that war between the United States and Russia, that war can be demonstrated here as an example. I'm not saying it can, and that's why I know that that war has prophetic significance. Now, I'm not suggesting that there are wars that don't have. What I am saying is we don't know our history and how to make application well enough to be able to identify those wars and what they mean. Because if we just say there's a lot of wars, if you go into YouTube, you can see videos where people do this. They track the last century and they say, let's track earthquakes or the magnitude of the earthquakes. And they'll say, you know, over the last 100 years, we've got a lot of earthquakes. So that means Jesus must be coming, because he's just getting more and more earthquakes. And I'm not saying that that's just rubbish, but, you know, that's like kindergarten. And it may not even be true, because you have lots of arguments that say that actually is not true. All we're doing now is our measurement equipment is so sensitive, we're just picking them all up. And they've been here all the time. And maybe we're not having more wars than we used to have. Maybe we have less. It's just, it's in our face because of news, 24/7 news. So that was a digression about tokens, that when we just think about wars and rumours of wars, I think far from being random, they're very specific, but our problem is we just don't know how to identify exactly what they are and the relevance of them. So, we're over time. Nobody told me. I'm sorry. Let's close with prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your goodness and mercy. We want to ask and pray for a blessing. Lord, help us to understand the work of the first angel as we work our way through the book that you have given us to prepare us for the soon coming Sunday, Lord. We want to ask that you'd continue to guide and direct us. Help us, Father, to not just recognize our weakness, but also to acknowledge your strength. Not only to see that we in many ways have failed you, but to see how unfailing you are in your love and your care and your protection towards us. May we take hold of your strength. We know, Lord, that we're still in the time of tokens, where there is still opportunity for us to prepare ourselves. Please be with us and please bless us. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.